I want to give Coach Drew and his team a ton of credit. Thought they started the game with a higher sense of just urgency and competitive spirit. Obviously, they have extremely talented players, and I thought our urgency defensively to start the game wasn't at the level that it needed to be. And then you start letting them get into a rhythm, start making some threes, and dig ourselves, a hole, which, has now started to kind of become a little bit of a trend. Last 4 games, been down double digits, and you just can't continuously play with fire like that. Fought hard, got some deflections, made that run in the first half. They answered back. Didn't like how we started the second half either. Took the timeout, fought back, scratched, clawed, got it to 3 right there, which felt like it was kind of at 3 for forever. We had several opportunities to cut into it further, but couldn't quite get over the hump. And then they made some tough shots late. We had some defensive breakdowns, and when we did break down, they made it. So to their credit, they did what they needed to do. They executed better. Coaches coached better. Players played better, and we'll have to learn from it.
Just like the other night, a long stretch in the second half where neither team scored. How do you come out of that as the better team, and kind of like you did at Kansas State, but tonight obviously Baylor came out?
Yeah, keep stopping them. You got to stop them for longer periods of time, and I'd have to go back and really watch the film to probably give you like a full assessment of that stretch, but it felt like during that stretch it was a combination of having some pretty good looks that we just couldn't get to go down, and then having some possessions that were poorly coached possessions.
How do you stop the guys? And I don't know that it happened tonight, but how do you stop them from pressing during and just throwing shots up just because they're getting anxious?
Yeah, you talk about it in timeouts. You talk about it in huddles, like, hey, we don't have to press offensively, but we're going to have to play with a higher level of desperation and urgency on the defensive end of the floor. Like, that's where your urgency and your desperation needs to kick in. But offensively, you just got to keep letting the game come to you and make the right play. And those guys all put a ton of time in, and they work really hard. And, more often than not, when they're in those positions, they've proven that they can make those shots.
Coach, out of the timeouts, it seemed like the offense came alive after everyone. What was kind of the message to your guys out of each of those timeouts?
Yeah, I think, more than anything, it was the ability to get organized and maybe, put people exactly where you wanted them to be. And so everybody knew specifically, where they were supposed to be and what you could do. And guys executed well in those situations, and just, all the coaches at this level, they're all really good at like ATOs, whether it's baseline out of bounds, sideline out of bounds. Like, you get your team over there and you can really put them in the positions that you want. There's a lot of, and that's why both ways. Defensively, you got to really have a high sense of urgency to combat that. And then, but our guys have always done a pretty good job of executing out of timeouts.
Only 14 points combined with Huff and the Eagle staff. I mean, was it Baylor's length? Was it their size? What were they doing to kind of throw both of them off tonight?
Yeah, I thought they did a good job. Well, they did a good job of limiting Trey's attempts. Couldn't get a lot of, clean leads for him. They were switching ball screens. So it kind of just, again, flattens you out and stagnates you a ton, and did a good job of staying attached to him when we were penetrating. And, again, they did a good job of kind of picking on who they wanted to help off of and who they didn't want to help off and where their help could come from. And just got to do a better job. I've got to do a better job of getting putting Trey in better positions to get, cleaner shots. And on Honors, I thought, of his 9 threes, again, I'd have to go back and really look, but of the 9 threes he took, I want to say I think 4 or 5 were pretty clean looks for him, and cleaner looks than sometimes of the ones he makes, So they did a good job. Everybody's been, they're physical with him. They put 2 on the ball. Again, he's been making the right play out of the ball screens, 4 assists, only 1 turnover. And, what you love about Honor is he's going to take ownership and accountability, and he's already down there on the floor right now getting shots up. So he'll learn from it, and he'll get better.
What did Baylor's length kind of do to your offense? It's a lot of long guards, especially with, on or Huff. That length can really disrupt his shot. How did their length disrupt everything you were trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, Carr, even though he's a wing, he's a great shot blocker. Obviously, Yesufu's strong and physical, and they have switchability across the board, and they can kind of crowd you and, again, gap you where they don't have to guard. Like Honor and Trey, they guard very closely. Some of those other guys, they can use length to clog the paint a little bit. And, you got to give them a ton of credit.
Have you seen a player like Carr this year? It just seemed like he was involved in every aspect of the game.
I mean, he's a great player, and you knew he was going to bounce back. He had a rough night in Cincinnati the other night and did what great players do. Came in with a high-level sense of urgency. Again, I thought to start the game, probably gave him a couple ones you want to make it harder on them because, again, great players, they don't need help. Like you got to make it hard on them, and I didn't think we did that early in the game.
Ross, earlier in the season, just kind of scuffling at the end of games, and you kind of said you have to go through it, and then you start to blow those games out. Do you apply something similar to slow starts and, all right, you've been through it a couple times, let's avoid that, or let's handle this better? Like, not the same problem, but similar solution?
Yeah, and you approach it the same way. It starts with me, obviously. Like, everything that, happens poorly in this program is, on me. So if it's a slow start, if it's a not finishing great, if it's, poor stretches of play, it's ultimately it's on the head coach, So we'll evaluate it all and kind of go back and look at your possessions and, try to take the emotions out of it and be objective as you can when you're evaluating it and like, okay, well, is this a good shot or is this not a good shot? And the sense of urgency defensively has also been a problem in these starts, and again, that's something else you have to look at, and whether it's you got to evaluate it all. Evaluate your shoot-arounds, evaluate your messaging, and all of it. Combinations of players and why and how come, and take extreme ownership in it and try to figure out a way to be better at it.
And this is probably simplifying it, but if you're down 8, 10, 12 early, you've gotten back into games, won these games too sometimes too. It takes a toll though. How much of that shows up in the second half of the game? Maybe not why it didn't go your way today, but it just feels like it's closer to E when you have to fight like that.
Well, yeah, again, like you can't talk to the team about that. Like you can't consistently, I shouldn't say you can't, but to your point, you greatly reduce the percentages of always coming out on top when you're always having to fight back from behind, and the amount of energy and emotion it takes to get yourself back in these games.
Anything else?
Brennan and Chance found success going to the rim in the second half. How much more of that can you do, and does that potentially open things up for Trey and Honor, or, if you keep kind of hammering that?
It can. Yeah, it can. We were able to kind of open up some driving lanes, and they got spread out a little bit late at the game. I'm sure they were, you really have a heightened sense of awareness of where Honor and Trey are, and I thought those guys were more decisive and got downhill. And again, you go smaller. You're a lot smaller, so you got to, like, what does that do to your defense? Part of the reason why there is more space out there is because you really downsize. You play Belo at your 5, and you play Chance at the 4, and there's just a lot of room out there. And they too were smaller because Powell didn't. They had Powell out of the game, and they were similar in size. So there's just not a lot of shot blocking out there.
Amir, only 6.5 minutes. Was that a product of the game plan coming in, or just in-game adjustments?
It's in-game adjustments, and again, I told him, like, I probably should have played him in the second half, honestly. But you get on that roll, and you're fighting, scratching, and clawing, and then you get it back to like 3, and then that group is kind of rolling, and Jasper was rebounding the ball and playing such good defense. I mean, Jasper, for a while there, felt like he was the only person rebounding the ball, and his on-ball defense and his disruptive nature. So you kind of like, you find a group that is working, and then it gets to that point where you hadn't played much at all, and then you put them in there with 3 minutes to go, it's just so. But no, Amir's great. His attitude was great. He was great on the bench, and he'll be ready to roll next time.
Coach, during that stretch in the second half where it was like that 3-point game for the longest time, and I was asking Brennan, it wasn't like you guys just kept coming down the floor and trying the same thing. It seemed like you were trying many different options. So I'm just kind of wondering, is it a situation where like you call something, maybe it doesn't work, or scratch it off, or maybe I come back to it, or just kind of take me through those minutes on what do you try, what don't you try, and that sort of thing. Or
yeah, it's a good question. Again, I'd probably have to like really watch those possessions in succession, but I thought we were getting stops, and we had got some good stuff just in the flow of the game. You were able to get some good shots. They weren't able to get their defensive set. So, you wanted to kind of keep playing with pace and playing with flow. And, again, I thought that led to some pretty good shots. We were able to get some clean looks. And then there were some other times, again, as a coach, and hindsight's always 20/20, when you have a disorganized or a disjointed possession and doesn't end up with even a shot result, of course, it's easy to be like, well, shit, I should have just put the brakes on it and at least called something to get us organized. But again, that's where we just got to keep getting better. Individuals got to get better. I got to get better. And sometimes you're putting the ball where you want it in the person's hands that you want it, and got pretty good looks, and the players want to make them, and you want it to go in, and everybody wants to go in, and it just didn't go in. And then there are the other possessions that are where I have to do a better job, where it's kind of an empty, it just doesn't even look, whether that's fatigue, some of it's that. Those guys are choosing to rest on offense. Like, well, you're getting stagnant on offense, yeah, because they don't want to move. And that's where you got to maybe play more guys, get them in, get them out. Like I said, you really evaluate everything, and I'm not the coach that's going to come in here and just be like, well, he didn't do this and he didn't do that. And, again, it starts with me, and I got to do a better job.
And then, you're talking about Honor taking ownership of, he's gone through the whole season with highlight shots, and it creates a certain level of excitement and surprise, I guess, maybe. But when it's this, does that also, is there some surprise to that as well? Although it's from the other end of the spectrum, I guess. So.
Yeah, yes, he's certainly raised the bar, from an expectation level that when he shoots it, you think it's going in. Regardless of how difficult it is, how deep it is, whether it's off the dribble, off the bounce, like you get used to those shots going in. But the reality is, no matter how good of a player you are, even if you're the best shooter on the planet, like Steph Curry is going to have 1 for 8, 2 for 15 nights. That's just basketball. So I thought he did a good job of being aggressive. I thought his defense got a lot better as the game went on, really challenged him early. Thought he had, didn't have a heightened sense of awareness on 5, but I thought he did a great job picking up the ball and was a good facilitator and had a couple clean looks that we're all used to him, making, and he wants to make them.
Coach, whenever you are in those long stretches, whenever you're not scoring, you do call a timeout and you do have to kind of reassess what's going on. How much is that is just positive messaging with your guys, just saying they'll fall, it'll fall, compared to just saying maybe let's try this compared to doing this?
Sorry, combination of both. If they're the right shots, that's where it is hard as a coach. It is hard as a coach to not get emotionally caught up in the ball going in the basket or not going in the basket. It's very difficult. It's very difficult for all of us. Because you may not like a shot and then it goes in, then, we're all over like, good shot, But the reality is it probably wasn't a great shot. So if you're getting decent shots and the looks that you would like in those stretches, then the message is going to be like, hey, man, we're getting good looks. We're going to make these. If you're not being strong enough with the ball, if your spacing is poor, if there's something from an execution standpoint that you're not doing, then your messaging is going to be that.
Ross, you're halfway through the Big 12, so 9 down, 9 to go. Just your reflections on what this has been like, but also what it's going to be like.
Yeah, it's hard to be like completely, reflective at the moment on the totality of it, because you're just coming out of, this game. But yeah, man, every night's again, you're playing against a great team, great coach, great buildings. There's going to be a high level of familiarity with the teams that you're playing moving forward. And there's certainly it's not going to get any easier. That's for sure.
And then this is the first for you. You don't win at home, which I wonder is obviously different things, but you get a road win, feels pretty good. And then is there a similar meeting parallel? I know that, but to not get a home win.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Anytime you lose at home, we take a lot of pride in protecting this place. Obviously, we have an incredible fan base. They tried everything they could to get us in that game today, man. They tried to will us into it. They were incredible. Never want to take that for granted. Disappointed we couldn't pull through for them. But anytime you lose at home, it's disappointing. Anytime you lose a game, it's disappointing. But we take pride in this place. We really do feel like we have one of the best home court advantages in the country, and you never want to lose a home game.
Coach, just to make sure, I was seeing what I was seeing. Was Baylor switching all five?
At times.
Okay.
At times, yeah. When Powell wasn't in there, they would pretty much. But then even when Powell was in, they would switch as well.
Is that unique at all to anything that you? I mean, I know.
But not.
Four guys switches.
Yeah. At times, but. There's been some other people that have done it, and Powell's a good defender at his size. He can actually switch out there and move his feet and cause some turnovers, with that. And that's where we got to do a better job. I got to do a better job of having a cleaner attack against the switches, where you can still get the ball moving and maybe organically find the mismatch with ball movement and player movement, as opposed to just one person getting the mismatch and feeling like I need to take this shot because I have the mismatch. And at times we did that well. Other times we did not do that well.